Drive past almost any dealership in Britain this year and you'll see them. Rows of brand new electric cars, plates still wrapped in plastic, wing mirrors folded in, sitting in the same spot they sat in last month. Not a mark on them. Not a mile on the clock that wasn't put there by a bloke shuffling them around the compound to stop the tyres going square. And they're not moving. Here's the strange part. We keep being told the electric car has won. More new EVs left British forecourts last year than ever before. Well over 470,000 of them, and for a stretch of the last 12 months, they even outsold petrol cars for the first time in history. So how can both things be true? How can the electric car be conquering Britain and quietly rotting on the tarmac at the same time? That's the story nobody at the car makers wants to tell you, and once you understand it, you'll never look at a shiny new EV the same way again. Let me take you back a step, because the whole mess starts with a number. The government has a rule now called the ZEV mandate, Zero Emission Vehicle. In plain English, it's a quota. This year, 2026, a third of every car maker's new sales in Britain, 33%, is legally supposed to be fully electric. Miss it, and the fine is brutal. £15,000 per car. Not the whole company, per single car sold over the limit. Imagine selling a family hatchback for 20-odd grand and being told you owe the Treasury £15,000 on top because it had an exhaust pipe. That's the world the manufacturers are living in. Now here's where it gets uncomfortable for them. The buyers didn't get the memo. Last year the industry only managed about 23% electric, when even the softer target for that year was 28%. So the factories in Germany, France, Korea and China kept building electric cars to hit the quota, ship after ship of them arriving at British ports, and the British public quietly kept choosing something else. The cars came in on the tide. The demand didn't come with them. And all that metal has to go somewhere. So it sits, on the forecourt, under the security lights, depreciating by the day, and there's a second engine driving this glut, one most people never see, because it doesn't happen in the showroom at all. It happens in offices. Salary sacrifice schemes and company fleets have been hoovering up electric cars for years, thousands upon thousands of them, because the tax breaks for a business are genuinely generous. A worker gives up a slice of salary, the company leases them a shiny new EV, everyone saves on tax, and off it goes. Fine. Except leases end. And when they end, all those cars come flooding back into the used market at roughly the same time, 3 years old, low mileage, all chasing the same buyers. Supply pours in from one end, while demand trickles in from the other. It's like a bath filling faster than it drains, and the water rising is all that unwanted metal. The leasing firms have got so twitchy about it, they're now inventing whole new schemes, second life leasing, longer terms, anything to stop the flood from crashing prices even harder than it already has. And that word, depreciation, that's the real horror story here. Because a car is only worth what someone will pay for it, and right now the used electric market in Britain is doing something I've never seen in my life. 3 years ago the average used EV in this country was changing hands for around £39,000. Today, around 20 grand. Some of the most searched models are averaging under 17,000. That's not a dip, that's a car losing half its value while barely moving, like watching an ice sculpture melt in fast forward. One bloke on a forum put it better than any analyst could. He bought a used electric Peugeot for £10,800. The first owner paid £37,500 for it new, same car. That first owner didn't crash it, didn't thrash it, he just bought it, and the market did the rest. And it isn't even a clean story of electric being worse than petrol across the board, which is what makes it so maddening for the trade. On average, an electric car loses somewhere around 38 to 42% of its value over 3 years, against roughly 35 to 40 for a comparable petrol car. Close, on paper, but averages hide the carnage. A handful of models hold their value beautifully, the well-known ones people still trust, while a long tail of others fall off a cliff, and it's that long tail piling up on the forecourts. Buyers can't always tell which is which before they sign, so the safest thing, the human thing, is to assume the worst and keep the wallet shut. Fear doesn't do nuance. Now think about what that does to the poor soul standing in the showroom. He's looking at a brand new EV with a sticker price of, say, £40,000, and in the back of his mind, he knows that in 3 years it might be worth 18, maybe less, his mates told him. The bloke at work who leased one is grumbling about it. So he does the maths, and he walks over to the petrol car instead, or the hybrid, and the salesman watches another electric one stay exactly where it is. That fear is contagious, and it feeds itself. Every time a new EV gets slashed in price to shift it, the used one on the forecourt next door loses value too. It's a spiral, and everyone in the trade can see it turning. You want to know just how desperate it's got? Look at Tesla, the brand that was supposed to be untouchable. Their sales in Britain fell off a cliff, down 29% one December, then a staggering 57% in a single January. Chinese brands sailed straight past them, and Tesla's answer was to quietly gut their lease prices. A Model 3 that was going for £600–700 a month not long ago, suddenly available for £252 plus VAT. The Model Y slipped under £400. They didn't shout about it in the adverts. They funneled the discounts quietly through the leasing firms to keep the unsold stock creeping out the door. When the poster child of the electric revolution is halving its prices in the dark, you know something's gone badly wrong with demand. But let's be fair, because the buyers aren't being stupid. They've got reasons, good ones, and this is the part that glossy launch videos never mention. Start with the cold. Britain isn't California. We get frost on the windscreen, we get grey Januaries that drag on for weeks, and battery chemistry hates the cold. On a proper freezing morning, an electric car can lose anywhere from 10 to 30% of its range. There are figures showing an EV holding only around 70% of its maximum range when the mercury drops to about -6. So the car that promised you 250 miles in the brochure is suddenly giving you 170 on the school run in February, with the heater blasting and the wipers going. For a family in Yorkshire planning a winter drive up to see the grandparents, that's not a spec sheet. That's a real, cold, knuckle-whitening worry about whether they'll make it to the next charger. And the chargers. Oh, the chargers. Yes, there are more than 70,000 of them dotted around the country now, and the network genuinely is growing. But ask anyone who's actually lived with an electric car through a bad week, and you'll get an earful. Broken units, fiddly apps that won't take your card, queues at the services on a bank holiday with 3 cars waiting for one working charger and everyone pretending they're not seething. And when you finally do plug into a rapid charger, you're paying 70–80 pence a kilowatt hour. Do the sums on a longer trip, and the running cost starts creeping uncomfortably close to a diesel, which was the one thing the electric car was never supposed to do. One reader summed up the gap perfectly when the papers ran a debate on it. On one side, owners saying it's never been a problem, cheap as chips to run at home. On the other, someone describing what they called 15-hour nightmare drives, hopping charger to charger, hoping each one worked. Same technology, 2 completely different lives. And if you're the buyer standing in the showroom, which story do you believe? And here's the cruel irony buried in all of it. In the ways that should matter, an electric car is often cheaper to keep. Servicing runs to about £165 a year on average, against roughly £205 for a petrol car, because there's no oil to change, no cam bolt, no exhaust to rot through, far fewer moving parts to go wrong. Charge it at home overnight on a cheap tariff, and the cost per mile makes a diesel look like daylight robbery. The people who've got a driveway and a wall box and a sensible commute genuinely are quids in, but that's exactly the trap. All those savings depend on the one thing not everyone has, a private place to plug in. If you live in a terrace in the middle of a city with no driveway, hunting for a public charger every few days at 70-odd pence a unit, the maths flips completely. So the same car is a bargain for one family and a burden for the next, and the buyer standing in the showroom has to work out which one he is before he signs. Most, when they're honest with themselves, aren't sure, and uncertainty, at 40 grand, sends people straight back to the petrol pump. Then there's the bill that catches people out after they've signed. Insurance. The average electric car in Britain now costs around £654 a year to insure, and for a lot of drivers it lands 10, 15, sometimes a good chunk more than the equivalent petrol car. Why? Because when an EV has a shunt, it's expensive and complicated to put right. Battery packs worth thousands, sensors and cameras baked into the bumpers, aluminium structures that need specialist welding, high voltage safety procedures that mean it can't just go to any little garage down the road. Some insurers have looked at all that and quietly written off cars for damage that would have been a cheap repair on a petrol motor, because the battery might be compromised and nobody wants to take the risk. Word gets round the pub, round the office, round the family WhatsApp group. And the buyer hears it, files it away with all the other doubts, and hesitates all over again on the showroom floor. So you've got this perfect storm. The car makers are forced by law to flood the country with electric cars. The buyers are hesitating over cold weather range, dodgy chargers, scary insurance, and terrifying depreciation. And in the middle, on the forecourt, sit the cars nobody's quite ready to take home. Now here's a twist that surprises people, because it complicates the easy story. It isn't the Chinese brands sitting still. Everyone assumed the flood of cars from China would be the ones gathering dust, the unknown badges nobody trusts. The opposite happened. Chinese electric cars roughly doubled their sales in Britain, grabbing around 1 in 6 of every new car sold, and getting on for 28% of all electric cars here now roll out of a Chinese factory. BYD went from selling under 9,000 cars in Britain one year to over 50,000 the next, an 8-fold leap, making Britain its biggest market outside China. Why? Because they turned up cheap, well-equipped, and they read the room. They looked at nervous British buyers and offered them a lot of car for the money, undercutting the established names. So it's not that Britain won't buy electric at any price, it's that Britain has got very, very picky about the price. And the cars rotting on the lots tend to be the ones that got the sums wrong, the overpriced ones, the ones from brands that thought a badge alone would still shift metal, because there are so many now. Over 160 different electric models on sale in Britain, with 60 more due to land. 160. Think about that for a second. There aren't 160 distinct pockets of buyers waiting with checkbooks. The market's been carved into slivers, dozens of near-identical crossovers, all chasing the same handful of customers, and mathematically, a lot of them were always going to lose. Some models trickle out in tiny numbers, a few hundred a year, quietly making up the quota and quietly filling the compound. Those are your ghosts, the brand new EVs that technically exist, technically for sale, that almost nobody actually wants. And you can feel the mood in the comments under any video on this stuff. People are angry, and they're honest. One thread lit up the moment BYD overtook Tesla, with commenter after commenter saying it was no surprise at all, that they'd walked away from certain brands on principle and on price. Another running argument you see constantly is the road tax one, because from this year electric cars have to pay it too, so one of the last big carrots for going electric just got yanked away. You read those threads and you realize the resistance isn't coming from people who hate technology. It's coming from ordinary drivers doing hard-nosed maths and not liking the answer. That's a far more dangerous kind of doubt for a car maker, because you can't fix it with a clever advert. You can only fix it by dropping the price, which they're doing, which makes the depreciation worse. Round and round it goes. So where does this leave us? Standing in the cold looking at all these unloved electric cars under the security lights. Honestly, it leaves us at one of the strangest moments the British car trade has ever seen. Because if you flip the whole thing on its head, everything that's a nightmare for the manufacturer is a gift for the patient buyer. All that fear, all that depreciation, all those cars nobody wants at full price. It means there has rarely been a better time to buy a used electric car in this country, if you're the sort who can hold your nerve. A 3-year-old EV for the price of a small petrol hatchback. Somebody else swallowed that £37,000 loss, so you didn't have to. Leasing firms are so nervous about demand, they're inventing whole new schemes just to tempt people in. The bargains are real, and they exist precisely because the panic is real. But it should also make us stop and think about how we got here. Nobody sat down and decided Britain needed 160 electric models and a legal quota forcing them onto a public that wasn't quite ready. It happened because a target on a spreadsheet in Whitehall collided with the way real people actually buy cars, slowly, nervously, with one eye on the winter forecast and the other on the resale value. And when a rule pushes harder than the market wants to move, you get exactly this, a glut. A graveyard of brand new cars, perfect and unwanted, waiting for a price cut that steals from the value of every EV already sitting on a driveway. The technology itself, though, isn't the villain here. Talk to the owners who love theirs, and they'll tell you it's a joy. Quiet, quick, cheap to run from a home charger overnight. Never seen the inside of a petrol station in years. They're not lying. For the right person, with a driveway and a plug and a commute that fits the range, an electric car is genuinely brilliant. The problem was never that electric cars are bad. The problem is that we tried to force the whole country through the door at once, before the chargers, the prices, and the winters were ready for it, and the cars caught in that gap. The ones nobody wants yet at the price on the windscreen are paying for that mistake in slow, silent depreciation. So next time you drive past that forecourt and see the rows of them sitting there, plastic still on the mirrors, not a mile on the clock, don't just see failed cars. See a whole system out of step with itself. See the target that got ahead of the buyers. See the frightened family who did the maths and chose the petrol one. And maybe, just maybe, see an opportunity, because one of those unloved, unwanted, brand new electric cars might be the smartest bargain you ever drove home, once someone else has taken the hit. I want to know where you stand on this one. Have you made the jump to electric and never looked back? Or are you the driver standing in the showroom doing the sums and walking away? Have you spotted the bargains yet, or are you waiting for prices to fall even further? Drop it in the comments. Tell me your winter range horror story, or your cheap as chips home charging brag, because both are true, and I want to hear all of it. If this opened your eyes to what's really happening on Britain's forecourts, give it a like and stick around, because the next chapter of this story is only just beginning, and it's going to get even stranger before it's done.